cutting off all supplies and trapping thousands of people who had been in Jerusalem for the Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread that were just completed. The Romans systematically built embankments around the city, gradually starving the city's inhabitants. The Romans held the city in this manner through the summer, defeating various sections of the city one by one. The final overthrow of the city occurred in early September. Ironically, when Jerusalem fell, guess what time of year it was? Passover. And the Romans came in during that feast and began to trap people in the city and starve them out. And this is extremely sad. In the first 143 days of that siege by Titus Vespasian, 600,000 Jewish people died in 143 days. Let me repeat that. 600,000 people. And you wonder why Jesus cried? You see, if he entered the city in, let's say, AD 32, 38 years from that, overlooking the city, he knew what was going to happen to the city. He saw it. And he prophesied it. Not only was he grieving, I believe, because of their rejection of him, I think he saw what was going to happen to the city. I think he saw into the future as he now predicts it. They will level you, 44, to the ground, your children within you, and they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not recognize, would you notice, the time of your visitation. He expected them to know, and they didn't. And the consequences, well, they're staggering. And they've been reaping that whirlwind incredibly for a couple thousand years. And Jesus looked ahead. And it's staggering what happened. It tells us, Josephus tells us in his book, and this is hard to take, folks, but this is what happened. So the soldiers, out of their wrath and hatred, they bore the Jews, nailed those they caught, one after one way and one after another, to crosses, by way of jest. They thought it was funny. And when their multitude was so great that room was wanting for crosses, and crosses were wanting for bodies. As Josephus paints the picture, he tells us that when the city fell, Romans were grabbing people and putting them up on crosses one after another. They were crucifying people all over the city. Think of it now. As Jesus overlooks the city and sees the future, he sees their rejection, he sees the fall of their city, he sees all these people being crucified. And what was he headed to do? He was headed for his own cross. In essence, I think he's saying, you don't have to go there. I'm going to die for you. I'm going to bring you the peace. Will you come? Will you come to me in this day of visitation? Have you? And so this is the account. And the one stone not left upon another was literally fulfilled. They burned down the temple to get at the gold. You can go there today and see the rubble that lays there in the city. 45 says, he entered the temple, and this, according to John's account, I believe, is the next day. What does he do? He began to cast out those who were selling. He cleansed the temple once at the beginning of his ministry, and now he cleanses it again. And in Passover week, what they would do is the Feast of Unleavened Bread followed the Passover. Passover was on Nisan 14, unleavened bread started on the 15th. One of the things that the Jews did in anticipation of the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread was they swept out the leaven out of their households. Jesus goes into his Father's house, and guess what he's doing? Sweeping out the leaven. He's saying, don't do that in my Father's house. My Father's house shall be called a house of prayer. And he cast out those who were selling, and he said to them, it is written, my house, and this is the temple. Notice he calls it my house, shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a robber's den. And in the New Testament, guess what? The house of God is you. We are the temple of the living God. So often Jesus comes to us, and what does he say? Sweep out the leaven. Get it out of your life. Go to the corners and get it out of your life. You say, are you sure? Are you sure that's a New Testament concept? Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1 Corinthians 5. Coming to the end. So take a look at this with me. So there's some really severe sin going on in the Corinthian church. And it says this, and you all know what leaven is? Leaven basically raises up the dough, right? So 1 Corinthians 5 verse 1 says, it is actually reported that there is immorality among you, 1 Corinthians 5:1. Immorality is such a kind that does not exist even among the Gentiles or unbelievers. Someone has his father's wife. I think they were appearing on some daytime television shows. And you have become, you see that word arrogant or prideful? If you have a New King James, it literally says you have become puffed up. That's what leaven does. Puffs you up with a bunch of pride. You have not mourned instead, in order that the one who had done this deed might be removed from your midst. Skip down to verse 6. Your boasting is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump of dough? Clean out the old leaven. Now he's talking to the Corinthian church, a largely Gentile church. That you may be a new lump, just as you are in fact unleavened, literally matzah, unleavened bread. For Christ, what is he? Our Passover also has been sacrificed. Let us therefore, in light of this truth, celebrate the feast, and I believe here in context, the feast of Passover. Not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Now back to Luke and we'll finish. See, we have a new life to live, you guys. And Jesus says, we are unleavened in him, but you know, even though we're forgiven people, the leaven seems to show up, and we gotta have a sweeping out party, spring cleaning, if you will. And so he fulfills lamb selection day, and then the whole week what they would do is they would inspect the lambs during this week leading up to Passover to make sure the lamb was without spot or blemish from Exodus 12. So guess what the religious leaders start to do? They start to question him. They start to ask him questions. They're inspecting the lamb. Another fulfillment of the Passover imagery. He was teaching 47 daily in the temple. But the chief priests and scribes and the leading men among the people, were trying to destroy him. And they could not find anything that they might do. And other Gospels tell us they couldn't find anything against him. For all the people were hanging upon his words. Would you bow with me? Father, we thank you for Jesus'